या थैंक यू। शुक्रिया सभी का जुड़ने के लिए। थैंक यू। जय भीम। नमस्ते, सलाम सबको। मैं ये वेबिनार के बारे में थोड़ा सा शुरू में बता देती हूँ। मेरा नाम आंचल है और मैं कल्पवृक्ष मेंबर हूँ। ये वेबिनार हमने अक्टूबर 2023 में पिछले साल शुरू किया था। वी स्टार्टेड दिस वेबिनार सीरीज इन अक्टूबर 2023। कल से कल की तरफ हिंदी में हमने इसका नाम रखा है, एंड इन इंग्लिश वी से फ्रॉम यस्टरडे टुवर्ड्स टुमारो। This series explores the relevance of ideas, ideals, and principles of Indian thought leaders of the yesteryears and sees live examples of their applications manifesting around us. These are valuable conversations, especially given the multiple crises India and the world are going through right now, and attempt to co-create a vision of a collective future. आज इस बातचीत में हमारे साथ मॉडरेटर हैं मीनल तत्पति, और पैनल में होंगे Grijesh Dinker from NCDHR or Priyanka Samy from NFDW. I welcome all three of you and thank you from bottom of my heart. Meenal Tatpati will be moderating this session. She is a researcher and lawyer with a keen interest in the jurisprudence and governance mechanisms of forests, specially protected areas, and the unrealized potential of free, prior, and informed consent FPIC provisions. She is also keenly observing the development of the carbon market in India and the world. She has worked with diverse local communities, including the Dongaria Kund community in Odisha and the Raika pastoralist community in Kumbhalgarh Wildlife Sanctuary, India. She is a member of Kalpavriksh, IUCN WCPA, as well as the IUCN WECA. She is currently engaged as a research and policy associate with Women for Biodiversity, where she is engaging with the monitoring framework of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, especially regarding its gender inclusive implementation. I personally am very glad and thank you all three of you from bottom of my heart to join this webinar. And as a team, as Vikalp Sangam, we are honored and privileged to have all three of you on board for the conversation. Meenal, please lead करिए इस conversation को. Thank you for moderating this session. To you.
Thank you, Anchal. And I think I'm really excited today because getting to talk to these two brilliant women about Ambedkar is something that it's like a really, I'm looking forward to the amazing conversations that are going to happen today. So thank you so much, Priyanka and Grijesh, for joining. I think it's so important to talk about Ambedkar's vision for justice in today's times, because what is happening around us and what we are seeing is a little bit of the slow dismantling of that vision that he had, of a very egalitarian form of justice. And I think he was somebody who, um, I believe, comes into the picture as one of the, jurist philosophers who have really engaged with the idea of justice coming from experience, and then looking at his vision for India is also something that I think, as especially in the environment movement, and the climate justice movement and the feminist movement, we really need to do. So very excited about this, and looking forward. Before we start, I'd like to introduce Grijesh and Priyanka. So Grijesh Dinker is an advocate and a Dalit human rights activist. She has been working in the development sector since 2010, in Rajasthan. Being associated with a Dalit organization, Grijesh has worked closely with human rights constitutional institutions like the state and national human rights commissions, as well as the courts. Her expertise lies in the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocity Act, especially focusing on sexual crimes. She also provides legal counseling to Dalit women and men survivors of caste and sexual violence. She has joined the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights in 2010 and has started serving the community at the national level. She has also contributed in the inclusion of Dalit, Adivasi, and marginalized communities in government programs on disaster risk reduction, which is DRR, and climate change adaptation, CCA. So, welcome, Grijesh ji. Also, I'd like to introduce Priyanka Samy. She's a Dalit feminist activist based in Bangalore. She is a member of the National Federation of Dalit Women, the NFDW, a grassroots network of Dalit women-led community-based organizations. Priyanka works with Dalit women and women from other historically marginalized communities at the grassroots. Her body of work is focused on unpacking and addressing intersectional issues, gender, caste-based violence, access to basic services, and strengthening feminist movements at the grassroots. Over the years, she has engaged with social justice movements and has been able to advance the voices of marginalized women, their agency and leadership. She's also part of several movements and networks from the local to the global level. She is a board member of the International Dalit Solidarity Network, and she's on the board of a grassroots organization called Service Society. She is a co-chair of the International Budget Partnership's Feminist Advisory Group and is a guest practitioner at the University of London, where she's taking a long-distance course on human rights. So thank you so much to Brijesh and Priyanka for engaging in this conversation with us. And I think I would like to start by asking you what encompasses Dr. Ambedkar's vision of justice, especially if we look at social justice. What is his vision? If you could just lay it out for us in a few short sentences or words, either Priyanka, Grijesh.
Thank you, Meenal, and thank you for having both Grijesh and me today. It's an absolute privilege to be with you today, especially because we celebrate Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his monumental legacy as the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. Actually, today, that is 29th August in 1947, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was appointed as the chairperson of the Constitution Drafting Committee. I think a moment that really marked the beginning of an unparalleled journey in sort of shaping independent India's destiny, if I may say. I think he was really entrusted with this massive task of drafting the Constitution, and it was really led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's personal conviction, his vision, his own resilience and commitment to social justice. So when you say what does social justice mean from his perspective, I think it was sort of deeply rooted in his personal experiences, his own struggles, and also the struggles of the Dalit community, and also largely influenced by his philosophical inspiration, especially deeply rooted in Buddhism as well. And also, what's really fascinating about his understanding of social justice was it was comprehensive. He very categorically says that it's just not the legal or political aspects, it's also the social and economic dimensions that really transform a society that's aspirational, a society at that point in time that wanted to become a democracy. His very famous quote says, political democracy alone cannot last unless there sort of lies at the base of it social democracy, which for me, I think really encapsulates his belief that social justice must include social transformation. Democracy must include social transformation. And in most of his works, he talks about his fear that a social and economic democracy, I'm sorry, democracy will be hollow without social and economic democracy and empowerment. As in, if you look at Ambedkar's early life, it really sort of exposed him to the harsh realities of the Varna system, the caste system per se. Personally, he faced discrimination firsthand, being forced to sit on a gunny sack in school, being denied access to drinking water. So that really sort of fueled his lifelong battle against caste oppression. So it was very personal. So, when somebody with this sort of lived reality sort of informs policy, and, that the personal experience really shapes how, the trajectory of his works. And when you look at the constitutional measures, as the chairperson of the drafting committee, I think all of his efforts, his lifelong efforts as a jurist, as a statesman, as an economist, it really culminated in the drafting of the Indian Constitution, where he ensured the inclusion of fundamental rights, not only for eradicating caste based discrimination, but he really sort of, ensured that every citizen, every person in this country is treated with dignity and equality. He very famously said the Constitution is not a mere legal document or a lawyer's document. It is a vehicle of life. Its spirit is always the spirit of age. So he had this very profound sort of understanding of, social justice, and where he wants to sort of, see that, and how he wants to see that manifest. And if you look at Baba Sahib's speeches in the Constituent Assembly, um, I truly believe it shaped the soul of Indian democracy. His words were not merely speeches, but if you look at his speeches, they're really a blueprint for a nation aspiring to rise above centuries of inequality. And I've said that's why it is only because a Dalit was the chairperson of the Constituent Assembly, and who took such keen interest in drafting the Constitution, that it is one of the most progressive documents in the world today, right? So he really understood the depths of oppression and discrimination that plagued our society, and his answer to that. Um, I mean, of course, there was the Dalit movement, but his personal answer to the plague of inequality and caste based discrimination was a document that promised to uplift the downtrodden, to provide equal opportunities, and to safeguard the rights of every citizen, not just the Dalits. So, for me, I think, in a nutshell, if I were to say, Meenal, sort of talking to your question, Baba Sahib is not the architect of the Constitution. He is the architect of equality. It is really, for me, I think he's the architect of human rights in India, right? Before that, there was no sort of precedence of such a progressive vision. When you talk about social and political liberty, when you talk about fraternity, I just want to touch upon fraternity and social solidarity, because he really, really emphasized in all his work that fraternity and brotherhood and sisterhood and personhood, whatever you would like to call it, is a crucial element of social justice. He really believed that, equality and liberty is absolutely, unattainable without that solidarity. To read his quote, he says that, we must begin by acknowledging that there's a complete absence of two things in Indian society. One is equality, the other is fraternity. So his life's work was dedicated to fostering solidarity amongst oppressed communities, to fight against systemic inequalities. And of course, he believed in inclusive nationalism. And that was very imperative for the oppressed communities, because we were completely excluded from the national narrative. There was an absolute erasure of oppressed communities, specifically of Dalit communities, of our histories, of our politics, of our folklore, so on and so forth. And I think what is important for this conversation today is, economic justice, because economic justice is so linked to environmental justice, right? So he laid a lot of stress on redistribution of resources. I think Baba Sahib's understanding of social justice, at the very core of it was, like I said, social and economic justice. So he believed that the caste system was not just a social, but also an economic hierarchy. He says that the caste system is a division of laborers, right? So he believed that the economic hierarchy needed dismantling. And he argued that land reforms and the redistribution of resources is absolutely critical to ensure the upliftment of the most downtrodden. And of course, Brijesh will touch upon the legal frameworks, and she's an expert at that, so I'll leave it to her. So yeah, this is just a nutshell, and then we can talk about it more. Thank you.
Thanks, Priyanka. I think you explained it so well because we call him the architect of the Constitution, that he's so much. It would be wise to say that the concept of human rights actually was brought in by Dr. Ambedkar. And
In India,
in
because
India,
the
in India,
Universal
in a
Declaration of Human Rights was a document that
absolutely, in a
recognized
uniquely
the
Indian sort of, yes, the idea of justice in Indian society, I think, would be something that, as you read him, you realize. And thank you so much for pointing that out. Just taking from what you said also, that we do have this visionary constitution, and we also have several, affirmative action kind of policies, laws that have come into place because these aspects were enshrined in the Constitution. But how much of it have we really achieved on the ground? How are we moving towards his vision of what uh, justice means for a country like India? So I would really like Rajesh ji to highlight this a little bit more.
Thank you, Meenal, and thank you, Priyanka, for shedding light on the efforts of Ambedkar, who has made a massive effort for the community, not only Dalit community, but all the citizens of India. But taking from her, I would like to say that Ambedkar also stated that social justice involves three fundamental elements: liberty, equality, and fraternity, like Priyanka said. Coming to the Dalit community, he made several provisions and affirmative actions in the constitution which enables Dalit community to overcome the adverse and vulgar effect of the caste system and to bring them into the mainstream of the society. Their holistic development categorized in general rights, political rights, and economical rights and social rights. So before going to the why there are some gaps, even if there are some provisions there, but still the community is striving, or community is still struggling to get into the mainstream of the society, or even still it is this community is facing the adverse effect of the caste system. The caste system is still prevalent in India. So before going that, I would like to shed light upon some uh, important provisions which he made in the Constitution. So as I said, in general rights, I would like to say the preamble of the Constitution itself speaks, about how the lives of the citizens should be. It should be free from violence and discrimination, and have freedom and personal liberty, irrespective of any identity, and equality. He also ensures equality. Article 14 says equality before the law. Article 15 says it completely prohibits the discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Art- Article 16, speaks about the equality of opportunities in matter of public employment. It affirms that affirmative actions should be taken to ensure the opportunities of education and employment for the citizens or citizens on margin through reservation. Article 17 completely abolished the untouchability. under which certain few legislations came into effect to abolish the caste-based discrimination and violence against the Dalit and Adivasis. So these are the provisions, which he introduced, to bring these marginalized section into the mainstream of the society. Some political, provisions are also made. Like Article 330 speaks of the reservation of seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the House of the People. Article 332 speaks about the reservation for these community in legislative assemblies of the states. And 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment also ensures the participation of these marginalized communities into the Panchayati Raj and also the urban municipalities, and when we look at the economic and social rights, Article 335 claims the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes to services and posts. Article 16, which I have already spoken about, the equality of opportunities in matter of public employment. Article 46, which is one of the aspect of the directive principle of the state, which says that states should make some provisions for the educational and economic interest of the SCs and STs and weaker sections. National Commission for the Scheduled Caste and National Commission for Scheduled Tribe also ensured by Article 338 and 340, and for the backward classes as well. So these are the provisions which are made in the constitution, and based on these provisions, several legislations have come into effect and enacted, and schemes and entitlements are introduced time to time for legal justice, social security, economic right, economic empowerment, education, and political representation of these communities, like SCST Act, Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocity Acts. It also amended in 2015. There are some acts for the abolition and rehabilitation of the manual scavengers. There are some provisions for pre-matric and post-matric scholarships. There are some scholarship for overseas, if anybody from these communities wants to go out, abroad and claim, sorry, get, education there, overseas scholarship are provided, entrepreneurship schemes and provisions are there, and most importantly, schedule, special component plan and tribal sub-plan are also introduced for a, separate fund allocation for the holistic development of these communities. These are the provisions where, if they are implemented properly, I think we do not need to knock the door of the court or sometimes to come on the roads or have these kind of webinars or to, write to and, have dharnas and sit-ins. I think if these are being implemented properly, I think we should not need to go on the roads. Despite all these stringent laws, I would definitely want to share as an advocate or also as an activist, 25% of the population, which were 16.6% of SCs and 8.6% of STs of, total population of India, they are subjected to induced violence, especially Dalit women. They face discrimination based on the caste origin. This is the National Crime Bureau, Bureau report. If you look at it, NCRB data, 2020 to 2022, there is a high increase in the violence against the Dalit and Adivasi women. So, despite all these provisions, I am asked why these communities are still at margin. So I would like to state, some gaps. One, I think, gap is the, lack of awareness. Lack of awareness among the community, not among the community, but among the government bodies. it is very sad to say that the government bodies like courts, the judges and the advocates and the people who are sitting in the government offices, they are not aware who are, and who are obligated to, provide the benefit to these communities through these provisions. They are not aware of these provisions. It is very sad to say this. And if I come to the lack in the and the gaps in the legal system, it we can discuss it whole day. The poor implementation of this legislation, it helps it is a poor reason of high acquittal rate and low conviction rate. Like you take the example of Hathras case, police and administration, they burned the body of the victim without the consent of the family, and it is worst form of the violation of a human right of a Dalit community. I would like to say that no, everybody knows how police act, tampered with the evidence, how the perpetrators are being shielded from the clutches of the law of the land. Caste prejudice is the second, I would say the caste prejudice and apathy of the law enforcing agencies and the civil society organizations towards the Dalit and Adivasis is the another, layer of challenge for of this community to come out of or overcome the effect of the caste system, and law enforcing agencies that I would like to say that judiciary in 2018 judiciary come up with the guidelines that to dilute the objective of the SC/ST Act, that is a sheer violation of human right of Dalits. And the culture of impunity in Indian criminal justice system is one of the reasons for increasing the violence against the Dalit Adivasi women and Dalit Adivasi community. So the justice delivery system, another thing is justice delivery system is very lengthy, very expensive, and complex for the people like Dalit and Adivasi and marginalized groups. So, the special public prosecutors are, provided to to conduct the case of these community in the special courts. But we all know what are the role of the public prosecutors as, prescribed by the law. But how they react, everybody knows that. They are not supporting the survivor, the complainant in the court. The preventive measures, SC/ST Act is the law where it does not talk about only about the punitive action but also the preventive measures. But the preventive measures are not taken into account as per the rule 8 of this stringent law by all states. Section 4 is not implemented where it speaks if there is negligence is conducted or negligence is done by any public servant in implementation of this law. No action is taken, under section 4. And I, uh, coming to other gaps, like, budget. Budget is the biggest challenge for implementation of law, because we know that any law, any policy, any scheme will come into will be implemented with only with the budget. But when we go to the social welfare department, which is the nodal agency for SC/ST Act or other provisions for the Dalit and Adivasi, we are always said that there is a lack of budget. For the scholarship, our students, Dalit and Adivasi students, are not getting the scholarship on time, or they are deprived of the scholarship because of the lack of the budget. And if budget is made, that is not targeted. Our people are not being benefited properly or completely with these schemes and policies. And in 2018, Niti Aayog Ayog's guideline, it says that, the budgetary, all the departments, union and state, in the state budget, all the departments are, has obligation to make the budgetary allocation for separately for the Dalit and Adivasis in proportion to their population in the state and in the union budget, uh, as per the population in India. But it is seen that the allocation is not made as per the mandate, and if the budget is made, it is not targeted. The important schemes where Dalit and Adivasis are being directly benefited, those schemes get less budget allocation, or they are neglected completely. And where the allocation is made, the fund is utilized in other heads. The fund is diverted. So how to ensure that these communities are being benefited? And the limited access to the resources, land right. We will discuss this later. But land right to the Dalit community is a dream. Everybody, many organizations are working, including NCDHR. We also work for the Dalit, land rights to the Dalit and Dalit women. And 73rd Amendment and 74th Amendment, I will come again to this, because I highly advocate for this representation of Dalit and Adivasis in politics. But we know Dalit and Adivasi chairperson, even in rural Panchayati Raj or in municipalities, the Dalit and Adivasi chairpersons are not, they are prevented to say, to enter the panchayat houses, or they are not allowed to sit in the chairs. They cannot make any resolution in the gram sabhas, or they are prevented to make any significant decision in the panchayat. All decisions are taken by the dominant communities. So how to ensure? Here I will leave the audience to think how the provisions are on place. Everybody, wherever I go, I always see that people are demanding for stringent and strong laws. We have sufficient laws, but where is the implementation, and how to ensure these communities to achieve those, or to access those important provisions and entitlements? So I think, we now think, being I say anything, I think, I will leave this to you to think how to make this thing possible. We have provisions, we have constitutions, but this is the reality of that is why the community are still on margin, and we are struggling. We are even I would like to say that when any case happens, we come on the roads, we protest, nationwide we have protests, for the sexual violences like this Kolkata rape or Nirbhaya rape. But we always have a selective approach in even protesting. When any case happened to a Dalit girl, Dalit woman, I have never seen anybody coming on the roads for the protesting. So I will leave you here with this question, that how to impress upon the government, impress upon the implementing agencies, to implement these important laws and provisions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brijesh. I think you really underlined um, some of the gaps that remain, and also pointed to the fact that while we have very strong legal positions, it is not always the people who implement those positions are not sensitized, and are also not sometimes aware of perpetuating the same kind of injustice that the laws are meant to break down. And I think we also have to realize that it's also a social change process. It's not just a legal process. It is something that has to start in society. maybe through different movements that we are a part of. And coming to that, um, since it is being hosted by Vihak Sangam, I'm also I also want to understand where you see movements like the environmental justice movement or the climate justice movement. Where are they in trying to either incorporate Ambedkar's idea of justice, and what are the gaps there that are remaining? Do you think that we've achieved the understanding of what Ambedkar was talking about when he was talking about an egalitarian form of justice, especially in our movement? So, Priyanka, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. Yeah. Are you able to hear me, Meenal? Hello.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Um, Hello.
We can hear you, Priyanka.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So to answer your question, I think there's an absolute dearth of Dalits, Adivasi leadership, not just in the environmental justice movement, but also in any social justice movement across the country, except the Dalit movement. Even within the Adivasi movement, the leadership is for of people from dominant castes. And I think the absence of strong Dalit leadership or strong Adivasi leadership in our movements is not an oversight, right? For me, I think that it is the outcome of a deliberate exclusion rooted in systemic inequalities that have been long perpetuated by, upper caste dominance. I think for far too long, social justice movements in India, even those ostensibly fighting for the marginalized, have been led and controlled by dominant caste leaders, and who consciously or unconsciously replicate the very hierarchies they claim to challenge. Right? If you look at how our movements are, if you look at the organograms of civil society organizations, of NGOs, of even community-based organizations that are not self-led, you will see this pattern throughout the country. And I think, you will always find Dalit and Adivasis in social justice movements, but they're often relegated to the role of foot soldiers. I call them foot soldiers because you will see them running around doing all the work, but the leadership still lies with people from dominant caste. So therefore, their voices in decision making, their voices in the sphere of leadership is absolutely unrecognized, and this must change, right? So there's a lot of tokenism within our movements, and it's something that we really really need to sort of reflect on. Even if Dalits and Adivasis are included, it's sort of included in a very tokenistic manner. Their participation is limited only to the grassroots, while, like I said, leadership in this.
Priyanka,
Yeah.
sorry, we can't hear you properly.
Or were you not able to hear me at all?
Priyanka, we
Uh,
can, I think a little slower it is. If you're using any
So,
earplugs or anything, please.
no, I'm not using any earphones. Is it better now?
it's better now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I think it
better.
was just me. Sorry.
Sorry, you weren't able to hear anything I said?
No, no, no.
No, no,
I
no.
could hear
Yeah, yeah.
just the last two sentences that you.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I said that, not to say that Dalit and Adivasis are not included in social movements. Of course, they're very much present, but very included in a very sort of tokenistic manner. You see that their participation is, sort of limited and concentrated at the grassroots, while leadership and decision making sort of firmly remain in the hands of the dominant caste, right? So this sort of reflects a deep-seated reluctance to cede real power and acknowledge the leadership capacities of Dalits and Adivasis. The one sort of excuse, or one sort of whatever explanation that's given is, oh, but they don't have the capacities to lead. They don't have the capacities to speak. Sort of maybe they don't have the language capacities, and therefore they're not fit for leadership roles, which is absolutely ridiculous. So the result is that very few people who are most affected by environmental degradation, most affected by land dispossession, most affected by systemic violence, are denied the opportunity to shape the movements that seek to address these issues, right? So therefore, our social justice movements are not self-led by those who are the most marginalized, and therefore we see how problematic that could be. So and this tokenism is not merely a failure of inclusion, right? It is a perpetuation of caste-based hierarchies within the very movements that seek to dismantle inequalities. And there's an inherent paradox in that. And also, it's a continuation, I think, of the upper caste tendency to seek themselves as saviors of the marginalized, rather than recognizing the agency and leadership of the marginalized themselves. And therefore, there's a very systematic sort of erasure of Dalit and Adivasi visions and leadership within all movements, right? So look, when we're talking about the environmental justice movement, and this is not just in India, it's across South Asia. For example, it often sort of romanticizes indigenous practices, indigenous culture, while ignoring the ongoing struggles of these communities against land grabs. There are progressive movements that are talking about it, but we somehow feel that the voices of those experiencing these marginalizations are not foregrounded. They're not leading these movements, and that sort of it loses its authenticity and urgency of their lived experiences. And I think somewhere there are also systematic barriers to leadership of people from marginalized communities, especially located at the grassroots. These barriers could include access to education, resources, networks. The one thing that we Dalits and Adivasis do not have is the social capital that the dominant caste sort of live on, right? I can pick the phone, and call up, some relative of mine or some friend of a friend who's an IS officer, who's an IPS officer, who's a forest officer, and I can, sort of pull strings to move things around. And if you look at how social justice movements have sort of, the leadership of social justice movements in India today, 80 years after independence, you will hardly see any Dalit leadership except for in the Dalit movement, right? And how many CSOs, other than the ones who are Dalit-led organizations, are headed by Dalits even today? And this is like almost nearly 80 years after affirmative action, right? So I truly believe that we replicate the caste system within our own spaces, and this is the so-called progressive space that you and I are sort of working in, right? So how do we sort of and if you see, the dominant caste, they not just, they not just dominate academia, not just NGOs, activist spaces, in every possible walk of life, right? So that's why we call them the dominant caste, because they're there everywhere. And so therefore making life and access for Dalits and Adivasis really, really difficult. So, and also the reluctance to sort of confront caste within these movements allow for upper caste individuals to sort of maintain their privilege, what we call as social capital, even as they sort of advocate for justice. So I think this sort of unwillingness to relinquish power and privilege is a significant obstacle to genuine transformation, and it sort of undermines the credibility of our movements. And in today's context, where the right wing is sort of getting stronger and stronger, we are still like working in silos, and we are still sort of not able, there's no sort of there's no sort of what is the right word, we're not able to sort of come up with any sort of semblance of a counter narrative to the right wing forces, because we are so divided, right? The social justice movements, each working on project mode, each working in their silos, are just not able to come together. And perhaps it's because they're not centering Dalit and Adivasi voices. I'm just saying this could be an oversimplification, saying that it is only because of this, but it's definitely one of the drawbacks of our movements, right? So I think for our movements to be truly transformational, if we want to be transformative, that is, if Dalit and Adivasi voices cannot be at the periphery. They cannot be on the sidelines. They have to be mainstream. They have to have a seat at the table. They have to be in the decision making bodies, right? And I think the community possess critical insights into the intersections of caste, class, environmental degradation, gender, uh, and so on and so forth. Like, there are various intersections in a country as diverse as India. And I think that is absolutely essential for meaningful transformation to take place. And I say this all the time, the transformational sort of aspirations that movements have can be very, very tokenistic. And I find as a Dalit, sometimes I'm also very tokenized. Our community is very tokenized. We're like a tick in the box. Oh, is there a panel discussion? Yes, let's have one Dalit and one Adivasi, on the panel, and that's about it. But I think that we really need to sort of transcend and move from these tokenistic solidarities to transformational solidarities. And in order to do that, we really need to reflect where especially in the context today, what does that mean? That definitely means that we go beyond the superficial allyship often displayed by those ensnared in the webs of Brahminical supremacy. It demands us to sort of take a deep introspective commitment into understanding the diverse ways in which people are systematically oppressed. For me, I think transformational solidarity is not just to be paraded at demonstrations and dharnas, and hashtag to trend on social media, and ensuring that one tick in the box representation on panels and committees. It is the quiet, consistent work of education, of unlearning century old prejudices. And I think most critically, it is relearning history from the perspectives of those who've been historically marginalized and who continue to be silenced and erased. Like even today, where are the Dalit and where are the Adivasi? And today India's in the context today in India, where are the Muslim voices in our social justice movements? So it really is about making space. It really is about stepping back, and it is about amplifying voices without overshadowing, appropriating, or co-opting their struggles. It is it it really is that act of that sort of finding that balance. Like for instance, in India, a significant obstacle confronting the movements today is the prevalence of what I call the echo chambers. It's like each of us are patting each other's back, and in the larger context, we're so irrelevant, right? Nobody's listening to us because clearly something that we're doing is we're not doing right. From occupying influential positions across organizations, philanthropies, corporates, advisories, and governments, the elites, you see, they often share a homogeneous dominant caste background. And be it the feminist movement or the social justice movement or any movement, it's raining savarnas, right? You left, right, and center savarnas. Even on we would like to believe that we're center and left of the center. Even in right wing spaces, it's the savarnas. So it's the savarnas versus the savarnas, right, left, or center, right? Depending on where the political where on the political spectrum you are, there is this troubling uniformity of caste groups. Whether you would like to hear this or not, these are facts, right? So self-led marginalized groups, particularly Dalit and Adivasi groups, what do we get by the end of it? Pittance, right? Um, our voices are not mainstream. We're not sort of cool enough to be seen anywhere. And even small things. In our movements we love having meetings and panels and so on and so forth. And even when we're invited on these panels, they always like to call us, especially in academic circles, they like to call us voices from the grassroots. While if an upper caste person is speaking on the same issue, they become subject matter specialists or subject matter experts. We're the ones with the lived realities, right? But they are the subject matter specialists because, they have access to higher education, and perhaps they have a MPhil and PhD on the subject. So I think this dichotomy not only diminishes our lived experiences, but also our expertise. And while this is happening, it sort of perpetuates a hierarchical narrative that privileges the elite, whether in our movements or not, right? So this sort of maintains, first of all, it contributes to erasure of our lived realities and our voices, status quo, right? So our faculties as people, as activists, as feminists, as whatever, even as academics, um, it's completely erased, and there's this narrative favoring the dominant caste. And now, since the right wing has sort of, come all guns blazing at progressive groups and social movements, suddenly Baba Sahib Ambedkar is becoming, a rallying point of resistance for everybody. Suddenly, if you see in the last 5 years, in every dharna, there would be a picture of Baba Sahib. And who's holding it? I mean, the Dalits have been holding it for the longest time, but now you see there is this proliferation of Baba Sahib's quotes and photographs and banners everywhere. And you see dominant caste people sort of holding all of these placards. And I think that it's great that you're holding it. This is what we want. But how about even practicing it, even in your own spaces, even in your own tiny CBOs, in your own tiny NGOs, in the larger movement? Right. So I think there's so much of nuance, and there's so much of unpacking of our own privilege that we need to do, because unless we sort of look within ourselves, um, what movement are we going to sort of carry forth, right? And also this whole thing about, you know, I think that the dominant castes have sort of monopolized resources. And I just don't mean financial resources. I mean even technical resources, educational resources, and resources of all sorts. So even when you look at how, movements and NGOs and CSOs, sort of pitch for funding, we're just like mere Dalit and Adivasis are mere beneficiaries of these projects. We're not equal partners in transforming, in sort of spearheading transformative change. We are just beneficiaries. We're just foot soldiers, even today. So, and, funders and also, people in the movement, they're sort of complicit in this dynamic, right? So because they also may come from privileged class, they don't see this, they miss this. So I think that it's absolutely important that we sort of reflect on our own privileges, we reflect on how movements work, we reflect on how we run our organizations, because I think it's really high time that we sort of commit to a solidarity that is progressive in practice, that is revolutionary in practice and just not in paper, a solidarity that sort of recognizes and acts on the unique struggles of historically excluded groups, whether it's the indigenous and Adivasi people protecting their lands and culture, or whether it is the Dalits resisting caste-based discrimination, or even, just about any oppressed communities striving for their rights and dignity. So I think for us to sort of support this transformative solidarity, it will really sort of support the oppressed in resisting erasure within our movements as well. I think that's really important. And, for Baba Sahib, he spoke so much about fraternity. He spoke so much about brotherhood. And, I said it in my opening remarks, because he thought that was the only way that the oppressed can mobilize and come together. And, his sort of defining slogan of agitate, organize, and educate. It is really the blueprint of social transformation for the oppressed communities, right? So I think that it's very important, for the dominant caste within our social movements to join us, the oppressed caste, in building solidarities from the local level. It will, it will sort of it sort of reminds us that in the pursuit of social justice and equity, none of us are free until all of us are free, right? So I'll leave you on that note, and we can talk more after Grijesh is done. Thank you.
Grijesh, do you also want to add to Priyanka's um, comment on this?
Priyanka has left nothing for me to say. um,
Okay. Um, so just thank you so much, Priyanka, for really unpacking this for us, especially when we think of how can movements make um, the liberation politics of Baba Sahib Ambedkar more relevant in their own functioning. But also, I think there is a general sort of understanding about how Dalit liberation movements are engaging with environmental and climate justice movements. You spoke that there is actually very little space for Dalit voices, but within Dalit movements also, is there a dichotomy of movements who are talking about economic liberalization and sort of how industrialization and in some aspects of capitalism are actually helpful to Dalits, um, so that they can rise above their caste identities. And then there are some movements which are talking more about earth kind of movements where there is land rights and rights over resources. So is there a dichotomy between these movements, or are they coming together? Do you think? And how do we begin to understand what these different sort of pathways are talking about?
uh, well, the paths for the Dalit liberation are complex and multifaceted, and there is no single universal, answer to that. But we cannot say that Dalit emancipation can be achieved by adopting any particular path. The three ways you are mentioning here, the industrialization, urbanization, and access to the land right and economic rights, and other way like, other affirmative actions, they have, you know, to certain point they are supporting, or they have there are some advantages and disadvantages. So coming to the the large scale of industrialization and urbanization, I would like to say that they are helping the Dalit community to coming out of the yeah, we may say that they are helping out, to overcome the effect of the caste system. But yes, but there are, I would like to say that new form of the discrimination and marginalization is coming out. There are indirect form of the violence and discrimination against these communities are coming into existence. We have several cases where during our work, where Dalit men and women working in these big industries, are denied wages and are beaten up and even killed for demanding the salaries. Sexual exploitation of Dalit women is very common in these spheres. This happens in collusion between the contractor and the owners, and they are mostly. We can say that everybody knows that the owners and the contractors, they are coming from the higher caste. We like dominant communities. So they come with their their casteistic ideology, you know, and the stories of grabbing lands and dispossessing the Dalit and Adivasis from their land in the name of the urbanization and industrialization is well known. Everybody knows that, big, Adivasi, communities are being, displaced, from their areas, from the forest by the big industrialists. So at one point, they are, exploiting, or they are, they, dispossessing the tribal communities from the forest, and they are grabbing the land of the Dalit communities for establishing the big industries. So I think, to some extent, that is also a Brahminical ideology, that they are helping the Dalit community in this way. But being a Dalit or coming from Dalit community, or experiencing, having the close experience of the pain of this community, I would like to say that this would hardly helping the community to come into the mainstream. And this, I would say that uh, you know this would not erase the caste identity, because jati nahi jati, unless caste is removed from the mind, people's mindset, caste will not go. And the dream of development of Dalit and eradication of caste system through this path, urbanization and industrialization, is possible only if the effort is made keeping, the firm intention and Dalit development in the center. It should also include the political way, I must say. If anything, and for the economic, you say land right. I access to the land right is a dream for this community. The struggle for the land rights for Dalit is known to all, and who work for the Dalit right in India knows that, enormous cases and matters are pending in the courts, you know, on Dalit land dispute, where they are being displaced and evicted, and their lands are encroached by the members of the dominant caste. Many states announced the land allocation for the Dalits, but they are only on papers. I strongly advocate for the land right for the Dalit women, to promote the women's land rights and property rights. Baba Sahab advocated for the property right for Dalit women, and for women for whole. Everybody knows that, that where this goes. There was a struggle between him and other leaderships on this, property right of Dalit for the women. It went into the coal bag, and the government has introduced for subsidies and rebates for on the stamp duties and property registration. But we all know that when it comes to the Dalit women, the struggle gets doubled, because here another barrier of patriarchy comes into action. So the idea of Dalit liberation through economic empowerment, requires adequate budgeting and targeted efforts. I would invite Priyanka, if she has something to say about this.
Rajesh, nothing more. Maybe when we have the question and answer round, there are specific questions, then we can answer it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Grijesh and Priyanka. I think we've crossed the time limit, so let's just go to the questions. We have two questions in the question and answer box from Suhas Sai. Um, so the first question is, what are your ideas for sensitizing decision makers and service providers in sectors like health, education, and judiciary? So I would ask either Grijesh or Priyanka to take this.
Well, sensitizing somebody is such a big task. Until unless it comes from inside, we cannot sensitize anybody. I think it starts from from the family and from the community. When we, because these lawmakers, policy makers, and implementers, they are coming from the same society, but and with the same ideology, but Manu's ideology, Brahminical ideology. So I think we have to first eradicate or abolish, we have to root out that ideology first, and then we can also work with this bunch of people where for judiciary I would like to say, and for health and other sector, but you mentioned it I think during their training programs and academy, where these after they are coming from, they had a long struggle to become a judge, or to become a doctor. So in their trainings, during their training and internship, I think they are the mandate should be made by the government, or we should also impress upon the government to bring some sessions on the sensitization programs, like for the judiciary, not only health and other, but also for the police also requires the sensitization on Dalit and Adivasi and Dalit women, Adivasi women. So I promote, I always speak about, and we also made effort during my work at the state level to approach the government and to the department to have a separate session on the SC/ST Act, on gender and patriarchy, and on the issues of Dalit and Adivasis, and to know, to and to sure to ensure that these people have that sensitization towards this community. And also we have to closely work with the universities and with the students, which right now I feel that today's India's youth is more, influenced by the religious identity, all because of the political scenario in India. So I think we also need to start working with the students, though many organizations are working with the youth, and youth are the new area where I think we should work and target these population, which is the we always say that the youth is the fortune of the for the country. So I think we also target these people. We also have some sessions in the universities and the colleges, uh, and especially with the college, medical college and law colleges, to make them sensitized towards this community, and especially to the Dalit women and Adivasi women.
Thanks, Grijesh. There's one more which Ashish has asked. What are your views on the recent Supreme Court judgment regarding the subcategorization of castes, including scheduled castes. So I think I would encourage both you and Priyanka to provide your views on this.
Priyanka, are you going or shall I go? Well, I condemn this move of Supreme Court because reservation in constitution with the help of that provision, I think very few people have got have achieved or the goal of I think the constitutional provisions has not yet fulfilled. I think by imposing and by having this kind of first of all, I would like to say that having this kind of people in judiciary, especially in the Supreme Court, is very dangerous for constitution and for the citizens of India, and especially for the people who are on the margin. So, and definitely this move of Supreme Court shows that they are apathetic, they are less sensitized, or they have they have made up their mind to defeat the very the objective of the constitution, that is social justice. So I feel that this should not be implemented, this should not be come into effect, because this will definitely defeat the constitutional the most important value, plus the criminal, in the name of criminal, how many we can count on fingers how many Dalit and Adivasis are into the judiciary, are into the administration and the police. So I think by doing this, we are forwarding towards the previous era of Manu, which Manu has in his mind, or the Brahminical approach or Brahminical society. So I think this should not be implemented, or I highly I have objection against this Supreme Court's statement, or what they are coming with.
I'd just like to add to that. I think the creamy layer argument put forth by the Supreme Court is really a blatant attempt to sort of undermine the hard-won rights of Dalits by sowing, division and weakening the effectiveness of affirmative action, right? It completely ignores the systematic nature of caste oppression and sort of seeks to divert attention from a deep-rooted sort of caste system to something else. So this argument is not about fairness, it is sort of I think employed to protect caste hierarchies in some sense and maintain Brahminical dominance in Indian society. If you look at it, by focusing on subcategorization, the Supreme Court has really diverted attention from the urgent need for comprehensive structural reforms within educational institutions, within any social sector, and address the systemic and intersectional nature of caste-based oppression. Instead of looking into this, like it's looking at something else. So the real issues such as education, when we talk about education, we mean access to quality education, land redistribution, healthcare, employment, are completely sidelined in favor of a superficial solution that does nothing to tackle the deep rooted injustices faced by Dalits. So, in some sense, I think this is a betrayal of Baba Sahib Ambedkar's vision. This is not going to take us, this is not going to annihilate caste. It's not at all moving in that direction. It, in fact, is moving in the opposite direction, perpetuating caste divisions further rather than dismantling it. So I think it's an absolutely regressive move. that really threatens to undo the progress made by generations of Dalit activists and the Dalit movement as a whole. Yes.
Thank you so much, Priyanka and Grijesh. I think just one last, I think if you could just comment on what I think Ashish made a comment. I think it brings us back to what we were talking about right in the beginning, where he said that it's probably an overstatement that we're saying that um, he was the architect of human rights in India, because there were a lot of people, including the Indian National Congress, who brought out charters like the Home Rule document, um, which guaranteed basic human rights like freedom of expression, equality before law. There were also people such as Tagore who advocated for other kinds of rights, very famously on the kind of nationalism that India needs to adopt. Um, and then the constitution itself was a collective effort of a lot of people apart from Ambedkar. So I think we began by saying that there is a very unique aspect to um, Ambedkar's vision of human rights. So if you could just answer that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, Meenal. I think let me clarify what I said. I said that Baba Sahib Ambedkar, as the chairperson of the drafting committee, squarely placed human rights agenda and the gender equality agenda in the constitution from the lens of the most marginalized and oppressed. Right? Never before. There were the Fules, and there were um, some of the revolutionaries, even Periyar contributed, but never was it sort of center stage, foregrounded and mainstreamed in a document before, right? So now, if you look at Ambedkar's proposed Hindu Code Bill that aimed to seek women's rights to property, inheritance, marriage, divorce, adoption, and guardianship, and so on and so forth, this was rejected by the Brahmin patriarchs on the ground that these rights, if granted to women, will destroy the Indian social order, right? But and therefore, Baba Sahib Ambedkar resigned as the law minister because the Code Bill was not passed in Parliament. But these ideas that he sort of proposed have sort of really influenced the enactment of many subsequent progressive acts, such as the Dowry Prohibition Act, and the Maternity Benefit Act, the Equal Remuneration Act, and so on and so forth, including, of course, the protection of women from domestic violence. So what I'm trying to say is that, you know of course, there were people, from very privileged backgrounds who were talking about rights, but never before was it sort of documented, the lens of the oppressed, documented and mainstreamed in a document, such as the Constitution. And of course, the Constitution was for the first time being sort of crafted, sort of being drafted, but the lens from which it was being done is what I was like focusing on. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I really hope that we could continue. I had so many questions to ask, but thank you for being here and for really taking us through the vision that Baba Sahib Ambedkar had for social justice and how our movements, which are very essential at this juncture in our country, need to inculcate some of these principles that are emanating from Ambedkarite thought, but also from Dalit movements and marginalized movements. Thank you so much, Grijesh. Thank you so much, Priyanka, for this for the time that you've spent with us, and looking forward to interacting more with you, and also the next episode of this series. So thank you so much. And for everybody who participated as well, thank